And so finally, we've reached the conclusion of God's Many, which began as a four-part series, but needed an extension to accommodate my long-windedness, I guess. Anyway, part 5 is entitled Advent of the Giants, coming to you courtesy of the draconian extraterrestrial master of the gods, as he haughtily aspires to be. In it, I focus on the gigantic challenges we face, both now and when the Nephilim, that is, the fallen ones, the rebel sons of God, are cast down to the earth under the leadership of the flying serpent, spoken of somewhat cryptically in the book of the prophet Isaiah, chapters 14 and 30. The prince of the rebels is more well known to us in the book of Revelation as that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who long ago was cursed to slither and slink ingloriously along the earth rather than fly in liberty throughout the celestial heavens. He intends to recover from his curse, or attempt to recover. The giants he is already breeding and grooming in our midst will be his ticket to lost glory, he thinks. But very quickly, before moving on into the Part 5 conclusion of this God's Many study, I really want to urge you, really want to urge you to view the 4 previous parts of this study, which were created to establish that extraterrestrial and alien entities are indeed very biblical notions. That is, the Holy Scriptures themselves speak quite factually and unequivocally about their existence in very clear terms. So if you've stumbled onto this final portion of the study without having viewed parts 1 through 4, well, part 5 will likely not convey anywhere near the value that is intended. So please do check out parts 1 through 4 if you can find the time. In part 4, I promised to outline some of the various technological phenomena the Bible indicates would be seen in the end of days. I haven't forgotten. In fact, this next scenario runs along those lines. You see, the book of Revelation, in chapter 13, foretells of a coming globe-encompassing tyranny engineered by the dragon, the chief insurgent space god, which will be zealously opposed by a class of societal pariahs who will stand up against this Luciferian establishment on Earth. What ensues is a deadly campaign of their extermination. Consider that 1/3 of the stars, our so-called space gods, are to be drawn, lured into the dragon's orbit to ultimately be cast down to Earth, as we learned in part 4 from reading the text of Revelation chapter 12, verse 4, I believe. And so what have they been drafted into? What role will they play when cast down to the very ground we walk on? Are they here already? Or are they currently engaged in the war in heaven, spoken of in verse 7 of Revelation chapter 12? And do you expect to see them? Hey, maybe you've already seen one. Well, any idea whether they might be invisible or what other form they may take? And anyway, does it even matter? Well, now let me take you to some relevant passages in the book of Revelation where the dragon of Revelation chapter 12, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, and his avatar, the man beast Antichrist of Revelation chapter 13, will make war with the saints and overcome them, according to verse 7 of Revelation 13. One of the details regarding that war of extermination is given in the same chapter, 13, where the following rather enigmatic phenomenon is described. It definitely smacks of an AI marvel, an artificial intelligence marvel, employed to identify and hunt down the New World Order outlaws, the Saints, by a fabricated, apparently robotic or android type creation. This fantastic AI creation will evidently be synthetically fabricated by a joint international Babylonian undertaking, directed by the spokesperson, the personal representative and active agent of the Antichrist man-beast. He is identified as a quote-unquote second beast, who appears, as it says, like a lamb, but speaks as a dragon, and who exercises all the power of the first beast before him, namely the Antichrist. That's quoting verses 11 through 12 of Revelation 13. And so, how does a dragon speak, incidentally? Would you readily recognize his voice as draconian? This second beast, as per Revelation chapter 13, quoting now from verses 13 through 14, does, as it says, great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceives those that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, the first beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, the infamous Antichrist, which had the wound by a sword and did live, apparently resuscitated or resurrected from a lethal wound delivered by some sort of weapon. Well, persuaded by miracles, we see that humans proceed to manufacture the image. And so, will it be an ordinary bronze or marble statue or sculpture? Or maybe something more trendy and technologically based? Now, where it gets really interesting is when the second beast gives life, as it says, artificial life, I imagine, to that robotic or holographic image made by Babylonian scientists. Why do I call them Babylonian? What does that mean? Because I hearken back to the time of Nimrod and his program of reaching unto heaven by a unified populace coming together at Babel after previously being diversely geodispersed, with a combined construction campaign that pulled together all the technical and engineering skills they could muster to fulfill their vision and accomplish the Babylonian goal. Smacks of the UN agenda today, huh? Well, not only will the image of the beast speak, as it says in verse 15 of Revelation 13, but it will by its artificial intelligence cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast, for example, the saints, that they should be killed. That's right. Whoever resists the New World Order agenda of the beast will be hunted to the death. And there are various ways this could be technically achieved, the captures and executions, that is, but the most likely one is via the third part of the stars of heaven that the dragon did cast to the earth, as it says in verse 4 of Revelation chapter 12. Well, these one-time stars will likely be drafted as lowly law enforcement agents of the dragon's avatar, who subjugates them into menial, mundane servitude, rounding up fugitive human outlaws, the saints of the true God, for execution. Now, all this may sound far-fetched, but there are scriptural bases for this kind of conclusion, especially when overlaying the prophecies of Daniel with the harmonic prophecies of the Apocalypse, the book of Revelation, dealing with the same satanic advent of the quote-unquote abomination of desolation. A parallel prophetic passage in the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verses 9 through 10, states that a certain end-time little horn, quote-unquote, which symbolically makes reference to a short-lived leader, will wax exceeding great in his day, even to the host of heaven, it says, and cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground. Well, Daniel's vision proceeds in verse 10 to detail that the little horn then stamped upon them, quote unquote. Not exactly a charitable overlord is this little horn, huh? You expected more from the devil? Well, without wandering any more deeply into the fantastic prophecies of Daniel in this God's many conclusion, let me assure you that it's quite obvious in the prophecy that this little horn to which I refer is indeed the end-time Antichrist. He is described in Daniel, just as in the book of Revelation, as an enormously haughty individual with, as it says, a mouth speaking great things, blasphemies against the Most High, and who also wears out or wastes and consumes the saints of the Most High for a short-lived period of 3.5 years, 42 months, or 1,260 days. Those who valiantly refuse worship of the image of the beast, or refuse his mark, his name or number, will be those defiant end-time pariahs I spoke of just a little bit ago, who will be tagged for elimination. By some sort of a system of biorecognition, the image itself will target the now criminal civil dissidents for apprehension and capital execution. Want to join the club? Well, now, who do you suppose would be the most likely officers of the beast? Henchmen, glad to hound and bully, detain, torture, and slaughter the dissenters. In Revelation chapter 20, verse 4, Apostle John details a vision he had concerning these marginalized and criminalized pariahs. This is what he says about them. I saw thrones, he says, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. Well, by now you've caught my drift. Yep, the deluded former stars of heaven, quote unquote, now fallen angels, who suckered for promises of power and glory if they'd ally with the dragon and join him in his planet Earth dominion agenda, now ultimately get used as stepping stones. That is, stamped upon, as it says, with the glorious authoritative duty of hunting down and murdering pathetic, worthless humans. Saints, more so. Wow. Space God's paradise, where their every spiteful and vicious evil lust can be fully realized. But here is the faith and patience of the saints, as they are repeatedly reassured in the book of Revelation. Namely, the vile and homicidal acts of those sadistic and cruel, demonic star god aliens will be duly rewarded with a final inglorious trampling they may have been deluded into thinking would never come to pass. That is, everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels, as Jesus promised in Matthew chapter 25, verse 41. And so, how will these brutal henchmen be alerted to our whereabouts and identity? The beast's AI image, maybe? Hey, it's technology only just around the bend. Buckle up. Moreover, there is the matter of the bizarre plague of an unearthly army John the Revelator saw, numbering 200,000, that is 200 million. It's a eugenicidal cavalry of really weird horses, as he described them, with heads of lions and tails like serpents, let loose to, as it says, slay the third part of men over a period of just over 13 months. The dream of the Illuminati cabal seeking world domination and population reduction, I understand, equaling approximately 2 billion useless eaters to be slaughtered. Mounted on these so-called horses were unspecified riders armored with, and I quote, breastplates of fire and of jacinth and brimstone. That's verse 17 of Revelation chapter 9. In terms of their armor, jacinth is translated from a Greek word making reference to either the gemstone of deep blue color or the red hyacinth flower. Brimstone is, of course, sulfur, which burns with a bluish color, altogether indicating that their breastplates glowed with some sort of a brilliant energy field. According to John's vision, the actual killing power of these bizarre chimeras, which were the fire-breathing hybrid creatures in Greek mythology that had lions' heads and serpents' tails and goat bodies, well, the killing power of these particular chimeras with horse bodies, John says, was in their mouths and in their tails. That's verse 19 of Revelation 9. These particular myth-like beasts likewise discharge fire and sulfur, as did the chimera of old. Are these projectiles, beams of energy? I don't know. Take a look for yourself, and let's see, that's Revelation chapter 9, verse 17. See what you think. My guess is that the riders mounted upon these unearthly chimera-type horses were not of earthly origin either. Rather, I suspect they will consist of the star gods that Satan recruited, as seen in Revelation chapter 12, verse 4, to back his earth domination agenda after he is cast down to the earth upon losing the war in space that he most likely instigates for his ambitious domination objective. Well, this massive alien army will carry out an enormous Hitlerian eugenics campaign, as well as serve as a plague upon evil men who choose the worship of devils, idolatry, the wicked works of their own hands, murders, fornications, pharmakeia, and thefts, as it is spoken of in Revelation chapter 9. Now we gather clearly from the Bible that evil angels, and those driven by them, are tightly restrained from their vindictive and vicious homicidal aims until and unless purposefully released to act out their wicked lusts. Their unleashing is without question regulated by the Almighty God himself, who looses them as his punishing, quote-unquote, sword and hand. Let me provide you with a few citations, only a few in this regard, starting with Psalm chapter 17, verses 13 through 14, then also Psalm 7, verse 11 through 13. Again, another Psalm, chapter 47, verse 9. Then the prophet Isaiah, chapter 10, verse 5, and also verses 12 and 15 of chapter 10. Also Isaiah chapter 37, verses 18 through 26. Then the prophet Habakkuk, chapter 1, verses 6 through 12. From the New Testament book of the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 4, verses 24 through 28. Then also, let me refer you back to the classic book of Job in the Old Testament, chapters 1 and 2. Well, be assured, Satan is never sovereign. He cannot do as he pleases without restraint, except in his dreams. As king of delusion, he himself is deluded. Another conjecture of mine is that this same Revelation 9 Chimera cavalry of 200 million will be a substantial contributing contingent to the Armageddon hordes, who are among all the armed forces mustered to attempt to defy and defeat the return of Messiah Yeshua to Jerusalem to take his holy throne there and reign as sovereign over all the earth for 1,000 years. You see, not only will the Antichrist beast need massive military might to counter the crushing power of the returning Lord of hosts, but also to subdue isolated human resistance to his domination ambitions, to his dominion ambitions, prior to the ultimate World War III Armageddon battle, as per Daniel chapter 11, which I really can't detail now for lack of time and space. And so that's a partial glimpse into my vision of the imminent future. What's yours? What do you imagine it will be like? Picture a world where the massive bulk of technology that we're already hooked on is aimed at quarantining and eliminating your presence and participation in the world of 21st century global society. The new eugenics campaign. Unless you swallow it all, that is, this technology of which I speak, unless you swallow it all, hook, line, and sinker, mark, name, and number, even then, there'll be no secure guarantees. Oh, as long as you bow down and worship, you might be safe, but indispensable to Satan or loved by him? Never. He'll snuff you out at a mere whim when he's done with you. Don't be a high-tech sucker, now nor then. And so now, here we are, just before the return of the Son of Man, Christ Yeshua, Jesus, the Son of God. And just as it was in the days of Noah and Lot, we have some fatal choices to make. And so what will it be? More and more technology? Are you really that addicted? Already so dependent you can't do without it? Are you persuaded, as the rest of the 99%, that it's the way of the future and you have to stay up with it, like the rest of the Joneses? Which is an interesting word to look up as well. Even want to ensure your kids get fully primed and equipped for it? Danger, I say. The following brief video news clip from 2009 about our attitudes toward technology has already been shown earlier in part 4 of this study. But again, I ask, does this clip speak for you too? You know, I really do hate being repetitive and tedious, but if there's anything the space gods want us to be primed and prepped for, it's our eager acceptance of the alluring technologies they will bring. Lying wonders, St. Paul called them in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9, performed by the fully unleashed power of Satan just before the return of Christ Yeshua. And so again I ask, what's your attitude toward technology?
If you think your kids are wasting their time sending text messages and hanging out online, think again. A new study shows they're picking up the very skills they'll need to survive in the digital age. Here's reporter Heather Sells.
Like so many kids these days, you can find 16-year-old Cole in lots of places. He's the editor of Porcupine Productions, creator of this MySpace page, and the artist on this YouTube video.
What you do to me.
Cole's whole family is into technology, from baby sister Glennis to mom Leah, who blogs.
I love technology. I love the computer.
Today, 9 or 10 years later, has anything changed? Only that technology and the love of it is even more prevalent, maybe? More pervasive? More global? Do you love it too? Will it be your master? That is, are you allowing it to master you? The Old Testament prophet Elijah once put it this way: which God you gonna serve? Well, the actual quote goes like this from 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 21. And Elijah came unto all the people and said, how long halt ye between two opinions? If the Lord, Jehovah, be God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people answered him not a word. Well, he who is soon to return to vanquish the usurping gods of evil, these ETs who promise we shall be as gods too, and he who will establish an entirely new world order of peace and true godliness, had this admonition for the double-minded, having trouble deciding what they preferred. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, Christ Jesus said this: no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. Well, while you ponder your personal leanings in this regard, here's a few other scriptural hints of the technologies that would exist in the final days, namely TV and the internet, that is, instantaneous, live, electronic, global communications. Implied by this are missile and rocket technologies also, necessary to launch the network of orbiting space satellites that make it all possible, computers included, without which such amazing feats would be thoroughly unfeasible. Okay, so where is any of this found in the Bible? One place, Revelation chapter 11, speaks of two powerful prophets dressed in sackcloth who will be world famous and be seen by all people around the world. Read it for yourself and try to explain how, without TV, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, etc., their assassinated bodies will be viewable lying unburied in the streets of Jerusalem for 3.5 days by all people, kindreds, tongues, and nations around the earth, as it says. And then remember, these technologies didn't even truly bloom until the last 4 decades or so, and some only 20 years ago or less. Then, as so many others have already made well known, is the famous mark of the beast, directly connected to the number and name of the beast. Without it, no one will be able to operate at all in the economy or daily routine of his New World Order, which would have been impossible only 50 years ago. Until the relatively recent development of the currently unlimited capacity of our now globally computerized digital society to collect and store and instantly access personal data on every single individual across the world, and to follow their activities 24/7, no such feat was even possible. Welcome to the digital age, where everything is digital, that is numbers based. Our smartphones, tablets, computers, our music, our video and TV entertainment, our photos, our social interactions, our personal data and medical records, our store and online marketplace purchases, banking and travel transactions, our instant access to all accumulated human knowledge, all numerical. Let's talk numbers. In digital terms, the mark of the beast and the numbers related to his name and the counting of it and the language of the computers upon which all of the aforementioned technology is based is numbers. All of it numbers. You know, the beast's digital domination agenda was foretold. According to Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 through 18, it says, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, including wage slaves, as are many of us, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Well, I can't tell you exactly what the 666 stands for. I don't have that wisdom, but I imagine that it won't be long before that too is revealed. Well, you know, Noah prepared for his flood. How are you preparing for the digital age flood? The days Jesus warned of, those eat, drink, and be merry days, just like Noah's. Well, check out these stylish and useful appliques, quote unquote useful. They're developed by the Michigan Institute of Technology. It's called DuoSkin, wearable technology. I bet you they'll have one your style. If you absolutely must have one to be in high-tech tat vogue, perhaps, or to carry on in the new high-tech digital era of perdition. Again, welcome, a facetious welcome actually, to the new age of preparation for the return of the Son of Man. The days when we will all have to decide whether to indulge in the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the digital fruit of this tree, in order to become as gods ourselves, assisted and mentored, of course, by the returning Nephilim space gods, the sons of perdition. You might remember the Eve-serpent dialogue in Genesis chapter 3. Beware the promise of technology masquerading as goodness and Satan appearing as an angel of light, just as Apostle Paul warned in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. Super intelligence, super longevity, and super well-being is already being promoted. Watch this. The following very potent and hard-hitting and very timely video was presented on YouTube, is presented on YouTube by BIOPS, the British Institute of Posthuman Studies. It's entitled Posthuman, An Introduction to Transhumanism.
Every aspect of our lives has been reshaped by technology, from the way we get around, the way we seek information, and the way we communicate. It's easy to think that if only our technology advances enough, we'll finally be satisfied. The fact is, we remain shackled by our primitive Darwinian brains. Humanity, for whatever progress we have made, is the result of an unguided, natural, 3.8 billion year long experiment of chemistry. Evolution is the process that has made you what you are, but it is not far-seeing. It does not and cannot consider the future, make decisions about where we ought to go, how we ought to be. Passing on genes is the only objective. But as thinking human beings, we care about far more than that.
And now, listen to Paul's prophecy regarding what to prepare for in the days before Messiah's second coming, and the giants he foretold of. He also covers the pop Christian doctrine and thoroughly misguided notion that none of this can happen to us because we'll be taken away in the rapture before then, which according to that fantasy could happen at any moment, they say. Well, that kind of belief system obviously dismisses any need to prepare at all or guard against the implications of the message I bring you today. But here's what he said nearly 2,000 years ago. And I quote from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, this rapture that people speak of, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. It's verses 1 through 4 of 2 Thessalonians 2. Besides the giantesque wonders he'll perform to convince us that he is God, empowered by the extraterrestrial dragon, of course, the only other giant matter we will surely have to contend with is the Antichrist himself and his institution of a mandate that every man, woman, and child on earth bow down in worship of his image. His astronomical pride and mammoth haughtiness is reflected in the Bible's account of the ancient Babylonian emperor King Nebuchadnezzar. He had an image made to himself out of pure gold that was 90 feet tall, also demanding worship. Many of you know the classic story found in the book of Daniel, chapter 3, in which the mandate was, and I quote from verse 6, "Whoso falleth not down and worshippeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." The rest of the account tells of 3 young Jews, companions of Daniel, who apparently were the only ones who refused to bow down in the face of a hellish demise, and were indeed tossed into that blazing furnace. Miraculously, they survived the furnace with not even the smell of smoke clinging to them. Now, I realize that the following question is more rhetorical than anything, since today's world is so far removed from such antiquated scenarios as those we read about in Daniel chapter 3. But would you have been so valiant as to brave being incinerated alive in a blazing furnace of fire, when all that was required to escape was a mere kneel and a bow? Well, according to the Holy Scriptures, you and I are soon to face a parallel challenge. Maybe not a furnace, but perhaps only beheading. Yet, the same book of Daniel does prophesy that during the reign of the Antichrist, they that understand among the people shall fall by the sword, that is some sort of weapon, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. That's quoted from verse 33 of Daniel chapter 11. Well, will you be made a fool of too? Are you falling away to eventually become convinced by Lucifer's high-tech miracles that the man of sin, the son of perdition, is the one to embrace, only to get the same treatment as the star gods of Daniel's end-time prophecy that we read about in Daniel chapter 8, verse 10? That is, to get stamped upon, trampled, and used as stepping stones by the prince of perdition to achieve his I am God, worship me agenda? Which basket are you putting all your eggs into? What are you investing in as though it was all that mattered, and passing it on to your kids? But hey, won't technology, regardless of its origin, be the universal answer to all our problems, all our desires, all our hopes and dreams? For our kids too? Will it not solve our health and medical issues, eventually prolonging our lives indefinitely, so we can eat, drink, and buy and sell, plant and marry and celebrate carefree without end with our kids too?
Every aspect of our lives has been reshaped by technology, from the way we get around, the way we seek information, and the way we communicate. It's easy to think that if only our technology advances enough, we'll finally be satisfied. The fact is, we remain shackled by our primitive Darwinian brains. Humanity, for whatever progress we have made, is the result of an unguided, natural, 3.8 billion year long experiment of chemistry. Evolution is the process that has made you what you are, but it is not far-seeing. It does not and cannot consider the future, make decisions about where we ought to go, how we ought to be. Passing on genes is the only objective. But as thinking human beings, we care about far more than that. Consciousness means that we have the capacity to experience the world, to reflect upon, and, most importantly, to shape it. And so, what begins as humanism, our most sympathetic understanding and treatment of human nature, becomes transhumanism, the drive to fundamentally revolutionize what it means to be human by way of technological advancements. Changing human nature might be the most dangerous idea in all of human history, or perhaps the most liberating. Generally speaking, transhumanist thought does two things. First, it considers current trends to see how future technologies will develop and how they might affect us. Second, it calls for the use of current and upcoming technology to bring about beneficial societal change. We'll examine three central areas of transhumanist thought: superlongevity, superintelligence, and super well-being, dubbed the three supers because of their extraordinary transformative potential. So let's begin with a thought experiment to get your intuitions flowing. Consider this. An evil organization creates an airborne virus. It infects you and the entire human race. As a result, 100,000 people are dying every day. Within 30 years, 1 in 7, a billion people, will have died because of the virus. Now, how much money should world leaders put into research to develop an antidote? How high on a list of global priorities would you rate this? There is no denying the situation would be dire. Most people would demand immediate action. But hey, this is just a thought experiment, right? Not quite. 100,000 people really do die every day from diseases caused by aging. But no one treats aging as a global priority. So what explains this double standard? Are we simply resigned to death by aging? Aubrey de Grey, an expert in research on aging, argues that our priorities are fundamentally skewed and that we must start thinking seriously about preventing the huge number of deaths due to aging, the greatest cause of fatal diseases in the Western world. The goal of this strand of transhumanism is super longevity. Today, we have the minds and the equipment to begin developing technologies to combat aging. Unfortunately, we lack the will and the financial support to do so. Most of us are so accustomed to the idea of growing old that aging seems like just a fact of life. If modern medicine is supposed to keep us alive and healthy for as long as possible, then the anti-aging movement takes medicine to its logical conclusion. It's what happens when as long as possible means as long as we want. But what would a world without aging look like? How would we manage the huge population growth? And who would own the technologies that make it possible? These are huge questions, but we only have time to raise them. We'll investigate them in depth in future videos. Let's move on to the next area of transhumanist thinking. Every year, computers are getting more powerful. What used to fill up a room now fits in our pockets. More crucially, the time it takes for computer power to double is also getting shorter. At the outset of computing, the doubling process took 18 months, and this interval appears to be getting smaller. Plot this on a graph, and it's not a straight line, but an exponential upward curve. We need only project into the future to see that there is a point at which this line is practically vertical, a moment in human history referred to as the technological singularity. The futurist thinker Ray Kurzweil postulates that as these technologies develop, we will likely edit our bodies in order to integrate with computers more and more. This concept should be familiar. We're already in a symbiotic relationship with technology. You can send your thoughts at incredible speeds to recipients on the other side of the planet, find your precise location using satellites, and access the world's repository of recorded human knowledge with the device you carry with you at all times. And all of this was unthinkable 20 years ago. Out of this predicted computer capability explosion may eventually come artificial intelligence, a simulated consciousness in silicon. Given the rate at which an AI will be able to improve itself, it will quickly become capable of thought with precision, speed, and intelligence presently inconceivable to the human mind. If Kurzweil is right and we end up integrating ourselves with technology, we could be in private contact with this AI whenever we choose. The result of this is that we effectively merge with this AI and its abilities become our own. This would propel the human race into a period of super-intelligence. But perhaps, as some argue, no non-biological computer could ever become conscious. Or what if, as every other dystopian science fiction plot goes, this AI's goals differ from our own? And what does our increasing reliance on computers mean for our future? Super longevity and superintelligence are all well and good, but only insofar as they make us happier, more fulfilled, more content. Let's look at the last section, which deals with the issue of well-being. Imagine you're soon to be a parent. Your doctor informs you that, if you wanted, you could choose certain features of your child's biology. You could choose how genetically prone to depression they will be, their levels of anxiety, jealousy, anger, and even their pain threshold. Would you choose a high likelihood of chronic depression, an intolerably low pain threshold? How about panic attacks and anxiety? Probably not. The last major branch of transhumanism, spearheaded by philosopher David Pearce, aims to investigate and phase out suffering. Pearce argues that if we ever hope to increase the well-being of our species, we will have to edit our genes. Minimizing our suffering, and the suffering of those we care about, is a crucial part of what drives us. Hence, so-called abolitionists argue that we start using modern technologies to do exactly that: minimize and eventually abolish suffering, ushering in an era of so-called super well-being. These are the three key areas of transhumanist thought, and we've only begun to scratch the surface. The three supers, super longevity, super intelligence, and super well-being, might radically change human history if, or when, they are realised. One of the main issues facing transhumanist ideals is that they are seen as far-fetched or perceived as just science fiction. But this is a big mistake. We are already transhuman. We're living longer, integrating more with technology, and emphasising quality of life. We're in the process of redesigning what it is to be human, only the effects are still so subtle and so slow that it doesn't look like much. But these changes will come faster and faster, and it's only wise to be an active, informed participant in the next stage of human development. Thanks for watching.
Well, I think we're well informed now about who will bring us this high-tech fruit and transfer more of these technological miracles to us. After all, isn't it our Eden legacy and our children's, if we'll do what the serpent tempted Eve to do? Do you remember what the fallen one had to say? Let me quote from Genesis chapter 3. He said, "Ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." That's verses 4 and 5 of Genesis chapter 3. Well, have your eyes been opened? Can you discern between what is good and what is evil? Well, for starters, let's not neglect what Christ Jesus had to say about a certain seductive evil with respect to the preservation of life, in the truly enduring sense, of course. According to him, striving to preserve our brief lives here on earth will only result in losing them eternally in the final analysis. And like Jesus, let's never bow down to that old serpent called the devil and Satan, or take his mark for any reason, let alone for the sake of survival, or what Jesus called saving your life. Damnation is no game. Let me share the following quotations from Messiah Yeshua. In chapter 16, verse 25 of Matthew's Gospel, he quotes Jesus as saying this: "Whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it." Then Mark, in his Gospel, chapter 8, in verses 35 through 36, quotes him as almost identically as saying, "Whosoever will save his life shall lose it. But whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" Then Luke, in chapter 9 of his Gospel, verse 24, quotes him once again almost verbatim: "Whosoever will save his life shall lose it. But whosoever will lose his life for my sake, the same shall save it." Once again, later on in chapter 17 of Luke's Gospel, verse 33, he once again quotes Jesus as saying, "Whosoever shall seek to save his life shall lose it, and whosoever shall lose his life shall preserve it." And lastly, the Apostle John in chapter 12 of his Gospel, verse 25, quotes Jesus as saying this: "He that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal." Those were quotations taken from all four of the Gospel writers. Now let me share some from the Apocalypse. John, in Revelation chapter 14, verse 9 through 12, says this: "The third angel followed, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up for ever and ever. And they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints who refuse. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus." The only coming giants that will seduce you or any of us into falling away from God and his truth and into any form of ET worship or of the hybrid son of a Luciferian extraterrestrial is the end-time giant that Jesus spoke of so very clearly. We've already seen his warning quoted earlier, but let's read it again. This is from Matthew chapter 24, verses 24 and 25, where he said, "For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I have told you before. Beware of the allure and entrapment of technology. In conclusion, let us not be baited by hawkers and panderers of giant futurism and other related speculations that only distract from the real issues we face, no matter how well-meaning they may appear. But pay attention to and focus on what Christ, Yeshua, and the holy prophets had to say about our days, as I've presented in essence in these present slides and in the previous parts of this God's Many series. On this matter, if you can find any verse or prophecy anywhere in the Bible that predicts that we will see giants in the end time, disallowing any speculative inference, please write to me at voxangel7@aol.com. That's VOXANGEL7, the numeral 7, at AOL.com. I will definitely revise this presentation and correct my error. But allow me to refer you back to part 4 of God's Many, about slide 65 or so, about hyped up and unfounded speculative inferences. And now for a couple more items of interest and links to insightful materials relating to ideas presented in this presentation. The first link provided here is to a video which we've already seen, the one entitled Post-Human, An Introduction to Transhumanism, presented by the British Institute for Post-Human Studies. Well, here in blue text is the YouTube address for you so that you can go to YouTube and watch this at any time at your leisure, or perhaps share it and refer it to someone else who may also have an interest. Well, next up is a TED Talk by renowned MIT professor Hugh Herr. The TED Talk that I consider a must-watch and really want you to see is entitled How We'll Become Cyborgs and Extend Human Potential. But due to copyright constraints, I'm not able to embed the video into my own presentation. But there is a workaround. What I will need to do is bridge you over to Hugh Herr's TED Talk on YouTube. To do so and be able to include this very relevant content to which I'm now referring you that strongly reinforces my message, I need to introduce a bit of an awkward interruption in my own presentation at this point. I feel certain, nonetheless, that you will appreciate it and find it very worthwhile after all is said and done. In fact, it will likely blow your mind, or at least rattle your cage. As I say, it's a must-watch. So please cross this bridge with me. The crossover includes a brief pause in my God's Many presentation to take about a 15-minute break or so for viewing Professor Hugh Herr's TED Talk on how we'll become cyborgs and extend human potential, which is actually featured right here on YouTube. No need to leave YouTube to view it. And once you've viewed the recommended video link here on YouTube, I hope you'll return here to my channel for the final portion of the God's Many conclusion, which consists only of about 15 more minutes of closing content. Thanks very much for your patience. I appreciate it. Now for the bridge directions. And so to view the TED Talk featuring Hugh Her, simply click this video, my video, to pause it. And since you're already at YouTube, just type in the search terms, "How We'll Become Cyborgs," in the youtube.com search field and hit enter, or click the search magnifying glass icon to locate the video and then play it. And here once again in blue text is the actual YouTube link that you could type into your browser at any time and watch the TED Talk, or perhaps refer it to someone else that you might know that may have an interest. Now, once you are done viewing the link, click your browser's back button to return here for the last bit of God's Many. Thank you again. Now, whenever you're ready, follow the instructions above and then return here afterward. Well, glad to have you back. I hope the Cyborg Talk by Hugh Her brought home the reality of the future we're all facing. As you see, it's already on our horizons. Buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a wild ride and a turbulent time of trial. Actually, choosing whether to go along for the ride or whether to jump off and endure becoming a hunted outcast is the real crux of the matter, the true trial of our faith. Now for the concluding portion of Part 5 of God's Many, Advent of the Giants. One of the next links I would like to share with you and refer you to is to a CBS News report out of Japan. It's entitled, "Japan's Population is Plunging. Can They Fill the Void with Robots?" I'm not exactly sure what the date was when this was first shown, but here in blue text is the web address that can be typed in to your browser, as I say, and actually go to the cbsnews.com website and view this particular news report. It's mind-blowing. It really is mind-blowing. They're working with very human-like androids, very advanced robotics going on in Japan. And there are many more links I would like to share with you. But a little exploration of your own, even right here on YouTube, should begin to rock your foundations a fair bit with regard to this message on the advent of the real giants we face. You know, when all the stops are removed and the ETs come down to us with great wrath, as the Bible foretells, then what we'll have to muster is mega resolve, gigantic mega resolve, to keep from being sucked into the gigantic seduction that will ultimately lead to the worship of the beast and his fiery flying serpent master, the old serpent, that is, the devil and Satan. Now, as for links, should we not link above all to the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father and the Son who created all things? If we call upon him with all our heart, he will come to our aid and deliver us from evil, whether it be high-tech or low. And if we're going to integrate with anything, let it be with him, so as to truly become as gods, not cyborgs. Don't you sense the urgency at all? Well, perhaps you will soon, hopefully before you too inescapably overdose on the technology addiction. But gosh, maybe you're waiting for that apocalypse angel to come, the good one that John saw in Revelation chapter 14, to convince you of the facts. Well, let me share on the next slide what that angel had to say, in case you're sort of unsure of what to think or believe about ETs and aliens and the technologies coming down to us. I have to comment that his message is generally shunned by most moderns as something unpalatable and unfriendly, even by most Bible believers, maybe including you too. Yet this was his end-time proclamation. In verses 6 and 7 of Revelation chapter 14, this is what John had to say. I, John, saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel, or good news, to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation, and kindred, and tongue, and people. And this is what the angel said with a loud voice: Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. Well, essentially, his message is abandon and reject evolutionary ET origin myths that the establishment and its mind-altering mass media have been indoctrinating us with. It's all absolutely false. Finally, I have to say, it's way past time to get desperate about these issues. Real faith in the Savior is no churchy rapture fantasy consisting of some supposed escape and exit from the ever so dreaded Great Tribulation and the great trial of our faith that it represents. Nor is it a pointless Bible prophecy pastime intended for its Christian drama value or for our pious entertainment or stimulation, or to tickle our ears and fancies about a future that we don't even believe will impact us whatsoever. It is about laying down one's life for the Messiah's word, his truths, his kingdom, and for the sake of his incomparable sacrifice. Don't you agree that it's time to get much more serious about all this? Well, a few verses later, verse 13 of Revelation 14 has this to say, and I quote, "Blessed are the dead, which die in the Lord from henceforth," throughout this great tribulation period. "Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them." And so here's praying that your faith, your works, and your future will not be founded upon falsehoods and lying wonders, deceptive technological marvels and promises. The promise of super well-being and super longevity will never be a product of man's Babylonian superintelligence, despite Luciferian technology, high Luciferian technology being added to the mix. It's the product of our loving Creator, who very painfully laid down his own life to redeem us from the snare of the serpent. Only through abandoning all other confidences and pursuing everlasting life through his name is there any hope of eternal well-being of any kind. And again, I ask, what'll it be? Will you opt to integrate and become one with synthetic Luciferian technology and its devious author, of course? Will you join him and his extraterrestrial team of star gods to achieve the serpent's Eden promise of becoming a godlike, superior human, immune from death, disease, or demise? Do you already operate embracing illusions of power, glory, and achievement, such as the American dream, striving to be as a god, craving super intelligence, super longevity, and super well-being, all at your fingertips? Will you go fully digital and adopt the name, number, and mark of the beast, the digital mark of the beast, to fulfill your lusts? Or will you rather choose to integrate in oneness with the one who made you, even if it means joining the courageous saints Apostle John spoke of in the Apocalypse, who risked their lives refusing the beast and his digital system of worship? We already know it won't be easy to endure, because it's foretold that it was given unto the beast, quoting from verse 7 of Revelation 13, it was given unto the beast / the Antichrist to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Yet we know from Revelation chapter 12, verse 11, that in the final analysis, they overcame him, the dragon, by the blood of the Lamb, Christ Yeshua, and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. And so, are you having trouble choosing? Well, maybe you should try seeking with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, the very one who the saints in Revelation chapter 12 found and loved and were willing to die for. Together, may we all join in identical sacrificial fashion with those who, like Messiah Yeshua too, that is Jesus, the beloved Son of God, loved not their lives unto the death, just as it says in verse 11 of Revelation 12. And in terms of seeking and finding, to quote from Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 10, verse 13, where he actually quoted from the Old Testament prophet Joel in chapter 2 of his prophecy, he says this: "Whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved." Now, as for oneness, Jesus prayed this for his disciples. This is taken from John chapter 17, verses 14 through 21, where he says, "I have given them thy word, and the world hath hated them, because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. I pray not that thou shouldest take them out of the world, but that thou shouldest keep them from the evil. Neither pray I for these disciples alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word, that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us." May we all choose to integrate with them rather than with the deluded dreamers of planet Earth who adopt the dragon's dream of becoming like gods. As I detailed in part 1 of God's Many, according to Psalm 82, the children of God are already gods. He said so. This is verse 6 of Psalm 82. And it goes like this: "I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High." And so, if you believe the scriptures and embrace this faith, the patience and faith of the saints detailed in the Apocalypse, you will ascend to take your rightful place in the end. Can't you wait till then? Are you prepared in patience to die for your faith? Or prepared instead to fall for the call to join Lucifer in his self-aggrandizing ambition to ascend above the heights of the clouds and be like the Most High, as he expresses in verse 14 of Isaiah chapter 14? I do hope and pray, if you're watching or hearing this message, that you are not already addicted to the high of injecting Luciferian technology and the instant gratification compulsion that the rest of the majority world population is shooting up. Ask any addict. It's hard to kick the habit. And so, folks, what more can I say? What more can be said? Well, I suppose a fair bit more, actually. But what did the Master say? He said that, and I quote, "No one can serve two masters. We must either hold to the cross or embrace the worldly mammon of technology and whatever it supposedly has to offer. Whatever you choose, I can say I've tried my best to persuade you to opt for eternal life, which life comes to us courtesy of the author of true life, who also authored the Bible and who also laid down his life for us. Rather than the vain temporal pursuits and lusts of the folks obsessed with worldly well-being and earthly futures, don't become a post-human casualty of the Luciferian delusion. The only other thing I can do at this point is to simply spell out that the technologies we are being plowed and seeded with will bear an extremely poisonous fruit that will utterly destroy your soul and that of all humanity, lured into falling away from the good seed of the Holy Bible. I'll say it again. Danger. The information presented herein is all meant for your benefit. Your choice of what to do with it is all yours as well. In reality, you know that everyone believes only what they want to believe. And so, I leave you to exercise your own sovereign choice of what to believe. And I do very sincerely hope here at the end of this presentation that you will take and heed Apostle Paul's advice to the Romans that he gave them in the 12th chapter of his epistle to them, where he urged the Romans, be not conformed to this world. God bless and keep you.